Hello, my name is Spencer, and I make trailers for AAA games. My work includes stuff for Star Wars, Transformers, Telltale, and the Dune Awakening launch campaign, which won 2 Platinums at the Muse Creative Awards last year. I loved working on these kinds of projects, but for a while, something about game trailers and games media has been bugging me. I feel like the focus on graphical fidelity is getting diminishing returns, right?
With metahumans, megascans, and whatever AI garbage fire comes our way next, anybody with a working knowledge of Unreal Engine can make some pretty decent looking stuff without needing to understand the foundational details of art direction or the tech behind what they're doing.
So I want to push myself. I want to do something interesting in a medium that I'm bad at to help me grow as an artist. I want to take a creative risk, make something imperfect, and be able to explain my decision making the entire way through. And I want to be able to enjoy the process. Art is about the journey, not the destination.
I decided to do something in the style of those old Hanna-Barbera or Toei filmations from late 1970s and early 1980s. These are functionally toy commercials, made as cheaply and quickly as possible.
I've never had the chance to work on a fantasy project before, despite it being my favorite genre, so I chose Baldur's Gate 3 as a subject.
The first step became script writing. I had a few options for how I was going to do it, but I realized that the voice acting would be a limiting factor. I could either pay the voice actors to read custom line in their character voices, cobble something together using their in-game voice lines, or use AI if I felt like immediately discrediting myself.
We already have a bank of voice lines that came with the game we paid for, so why wouldn't I use those?
Sure, some of the lines will sound weird when smushed together, but the voice acting on these old shows wasn't great.
Why would he take my daughter?
I have no idea. But he has done it, and you must save her.
And most importantly, this is the cheapest option, which means that it's absolutely what they would have done back in the day. Using the available voice lines as a guide, I wrote up a script filling in blanks with voice lines from the 1980s Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. One of the creative decisions that show made was to include a character called Dungeon Master, who was there to explain the plot to the audience and protagonists.
Anybody who's actually played D&D or a tabletop game before will know that this is not necessarily good DMing, but the people who are making this show did not have a financial interest in accurately representing D&D, they just needed to sell toys.
So, cutting all those together, we now have a new challenge because the audio doesn't match up. Dungeon Master's voice was recorded in an LA studio in 1983 and stored on magnetic tape, which degraded slowly due to transfer production and the deterioration of the iron oxide used to read information, which is also what resulted in the quality loss when the show was digitized and released on DVD in 2004.
Okay, that run-on sentence could have done a marathon. My point is that Dungeon Master's voice sounds different to everybody else's, and my ancillary point is that good art direction requires a deep understanding of the source material and everything around it.
Knowing the manner in which the voice recordings degraded informs my decision on how to match the surrounding audio to it, which means that, with a little bit of extra work, we have a cohesive and authentic sounding audio track.
Now that I have audio, it's time to plan out the visuals. Like I said earlier, I don't consider myself much of an illustrator. All of my technique lies firmly in the realm of digital art.
I realized that in order to get consistent looking drawings across each part of the process, it may genuinely be faster to just make 3D models of everything and then paint that over in post-processing. So I modeled and then rigged each of the 7 characters I would be using. I'd initially done each character design not only as a simplified version of their BG3 look, but also to accommodate for typical 80s merchandising decisions. A common trope for the time was an overuse of noxiously bright colors, particularly green and orange. This was because they displayed well on old television sets, were recognizable for young children, and the plastic for toy manufacturing was considerably cheaper compared to more in-demand colors. However, after going back and forth with a few iterations, I decided to tone back 1 or 2 of the designs for helping them read better as their character and class. But I'll never forget you, Green Pants Asterion. With the characters done, I began a block-out animation to work out camera angles and key poses. After rendering it out though, I noticed a profound issue. I was thinking about this like a 3D animator. My composition might have been fine as a setup for a normal project, but it didn't at all reflect the style going into the shows I was imitating. I needed consistent line weight, more close-ups, limited animation, more careful attention to what was going to be hand-drawn and what was 3D, and most of all, big clear poses that would be readable at a low resolution. So I started redlining my 3D animation. I pulled some references and drew corrective frames on some shots, then changed entire compositions for the ones where I had a more direct point of comparison.
It was an absolute pain in the beginning, but it was certainly worthwhile.
After spending a little while cheating 3D rigs to look and behave more like 2D animation, I felt like I finally had a decent base to work from. I took it into After Effects and selectively added line boil to the parts of the frame that moved from one point to the next. Then I exported out the sequence and began the arduous task of painting it all over.
This is probably the part where someone can point to the amount of time it took and say, wouldn't it have just been faster to hand draw the entire thing? To that, the answer is yes.
I'd worked in 3D on this for two reasons. The primary one being that I wasn't good at 2D, but that's just something that can be overcome by practice, and I definitely would have been good at it by the end of a process like this. The secondary one was that my main reference for achieving this look in the modern age was also done in 3D, this Transformers animation. Now, with hindsight, I can say it works better for Transformers because they largely consist of hard surface shapes with straight lines, whereas these characters are more organic. Still though, I think I made the right call. I wouldn't have stuck with this project all the way through if I didn't get to use Blender, because I love working in 3D even when it's on ridiculous stuff like this, and I can't say the same for 2D quite yet. So anyways, I did my draw-overs, going through and adding detail to the face, fingers, and outfits. Then I added color, lip sync, and realized that I'd gotten better at drawing faces since I started, so I went back and redid a handful of the older faces so that it would be more consistent throughout the animation. By the end, it looked less like a specifically Hanna-Barbera or Toei-directed art piece because my line work has a certain sketchiness to it, but I think that's okay.
It wasn't made by Toei, it was made by me, and I'm not an illustrator.
Finally, we got to the 15th level of post-production, my favorite part. Here I corrected a bunch of little errors like faces that were disconnected from bodies, or lines that weren't colored in, or mouths that needed to be added. I fixed some issues I'd been having with the audio thanks to listening to it over and over and over and over, and I made a few changes in the animation, and I worked through the compositing process.
Initially, I'd planned for a few layers of compression to go over the final image.
The first and most important one was film. In these 80s toy cartoons, each frame was physically photographed, and this was before digital, so gate weave, grain, pieces of hair, and color issues from the film development process were all in play.
I then planned on adding TV signal interference and some VHS tape processing because I remember that being the way I watched a lot of these shows.
However, I'd also been cooking up an opinion that VHS is overdone, and once I saw the amount of definition that had been lost by even the lightest VHS processing, as well as the way it messed with the color, I'd come to my senses.
The final piece of compression is digital, and since I wasn't doing the VHS stuff, it became even more important to get it right.
This is DVD. It looks and sounds like you're at the movies, but you can experience it at home.
DVDs had what we would consider now to be fairly low storage space. They crammed as much as they could in there by compressing the frame size, reducing color data, and storing parts of images instead of whole images. Basic video compression techniques still used by every major codec today, but implemented worse and more clumsily.
I mean, this is the early 2000s. They still had H.263. Do you know how much data they lost in the transmission channel? They didn't even have VBSMC.
So, I upped the film damage a little to compensate for the fact that the fictional Baldur's Gate 3 cartoon film negatives had been moldering in a basement for 20 years, then gave it a bit of JPEG damage to simulate the process of scanning film reels into digital video, then crunched the frame size a bit, exported it with a primitive video codec, and ran it through some late 90s era digital compression algorithms a few times to get the damage looking just right for an authentic DVD release. Once that was done, I uploaded it to YouTube, where it was auto-transcoded into modern codecs like AV1 and H.265, taking a hammer to the delicate compositing and compression work I'd been doing.
But I know I did it, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Here's the final product.
That chest's magic. Its energy has me all a tingle.
What riches might it contain?
Undead witches is more like it. I wouldn't touch that box if I were you.
An unusual chest. The sort that holds more than just a few worthless baubles.
The Cavalier is right. There is much of value in that box. And an equal amount of pain and horror.
Oh, baby!
A monster masquerading as furniture. Clever.
Ugh. That creature was rather prettier in disguise.
I don't discriminate against any type.
Truly a bear man of the people.
Let's hope for gold.
Another mimic! Oh, look at all those teeth!
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice and... Wait, how's it go again?
Let's just get this over with.
Fool me twice and... I'd be a fool if it didn't.
No!
But who am I fooling?
Shut up!
But a fool's a fool!
Do not squander this.
Overall, I think I'm pretty happy with what I accomplished. It's nowhere near as flashy as the big collaborative projects that you usually get to work on as a trailer artist, but it's still pretty thoroughly enjoyable to just sit down and devote yourself single-mindedly to the vision of an insane person, just so long that insane person is yourself.
It's also pretty fun to try and make 3D animation that doesn't look like 3D animation, even if it's time-consuming and logistically confusing.
If I were to do it again, I'd change nearly every part of the production process that I ended up going with, but that just means that I'm smarter and more experienced now than I was when I started, which, yeah, I should hope so.
It was also really engaging to work on something so far out of my comfort zone and ability level. What I made wasn't perfect, but I made it myself, with no brand guide, direction, external approvers, or anything like that, and it's also not something like what I would have made normally.
It feels like a pretty objective assessment of my skill level as an artist, my ability to adapt, to learn, to try new things without fear of failure. And if you still think that I made a mistake by doing so much of this project in 3D rather than 2D, then let me know how it feels to be completely incorrect. Didn't I tell you that the whole point of making these animated shows was to sell toys? With 3D models of the entire cast, I now have the ability to manufacture merchandise and recoup my time investment tenfold!
All will genuflect before me, and the earth shall quiver! Submit, and you may be spared!
Each toy sold separately.
Down, down.